Hi, Jody. Fantastic seeing you. Thanks so much
Hi.
for being here, obviously, today.
Of course. Nice to meet you.
You too. So I'm still reeling from seeing this movie in Toronto a couple of days ago. Definitely the best zombie film that I've ever seen. Uh, to kind of, I guess, kick things off here, Jody, you know, I found that one of the things that really, kind of drives this film well above your typical zombie movie is clearly the strong relationship that Spike, of course, played by Alfie Williams, and his mom, played, of course, by you. And as far as I'm concerned, you both play those parts to heroic perfection. It's a really complex mother son, very strong bonding relationship, but that's at the core of this movie. But I'd love to hear about your initial reaction to Isla after you've read the script and what you felt it would take for you, both personally and professionally, to bring such a challenging character to life.
Hmm. Well, I was so it's funny when I read the script for 28 years, it immediately kind of transported me to when I watched 28 Days Later and thinking about the kind of the relationships and the dynamics that were present within that film. Brendan Gleeson's character being one that comes to mind straight away, with the relationship he had with his daughter and
Right.
what kind of transpired there. And I was so struck by how, on paper this is a horror genre, but it's so much more, and there's so much actual levity and intimacy and emotion. And for Alex and Danny to have been able to married all of that together so seamlessly felt really profound to me. And I guess in a world that does feel heightened and epic and full of terror, there was actually a through line that felt very relatable and emotionally driven, which I felt like I could really ground myself to. So that was really exciting. And then you're right, it's there's this dynamic of this family setup, and there's complications within that, one of them being Isla's illness, and which creates a lot of nuance in her relationship to her son because he's actually often having to be the guardian and the parental figure and the kind of source of comfort and strength. Um so I knew that coming to this, it was like, wow, okay, what does this illness look like? It has to be believable. How do I map this out over an entire film? Um, and to find that with Alfie, I was like, that was going to be my biggest challenges I had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know as far as preparing for this specific role, Jody, I mean, I can only imagine just getting inside of, the headspace of a character like Isla, like as you mentioned, could only lead to some really fascinating, if not downright scary perspectives that maybe you haven't really given space to previously while working or previous to working on this movie rather. And how might how might your character have informed your perspectives about maybe the world around you during the filming process? And how do you think that she's ultimately going to inform viewers who may or may not be ready for the perspectives that she has to offer them?
Well, it's funny, right? Because there's like this awful reality that she has her own terror in her own mind and her own body. She's been kind of hijacked by this illness, but it also kind of provides her with this respite from the reality of the world and the severity of the situation and the danger that is kind of lurking beyond the causeway. So she does have this element of escapism, um, which I think gives her relief, and maybe provides the audience with that in moments. I don't know. Um, but she spends a lot of time alone, a lot of time in her own head. And a lot of the time I feel like you're like, is she observing this? Is she listening? Is she taking this in? It's never kind of fully clear in what kind of state she is in. So I feel like yeah, I was very kind of introspective on this job.
Yeah, absolutely. She, in a lot of ways, I found that she was almost sort of this unreliable final girl, if you will. That might be a little bit of a crass way to put that, but that was some of the perspective that I got from watching the performance.
Well, I think it's
And
also with memory, right? It's like if what Spike is learning is all from memory, everyone's got a different memory of what happened and a different version of that. And her memory is really unreliable and takes her to when she was a child, you know? So it's like what does this kid have to go off of? Mm.
right, right. And I know speaking of such a non-typical zombie movie, call me crazy, but I'm pretty sure there's a rule somewhere that says that zombie movies, especially one as just frankly balls to the wall, violent and brutal as this one is, they're not supposed to make you cry. But I'm not ashamed to admit that I totally freaking bawled while I was watching this in the movie. I know I'm not the only one. There was a particular scene, of course, involving Isla, Spike, Alfie, and the Dr. Kelson, who may or may not be insane. But without giving away too many spoilers, if that is possible, could you maybe share a little bit about what the energy and just general mood was like on set while you're filming those particular scenes that were involving the Bone Temple and how everybody involved just were able to navigate creating such a intensely emotional experience?
Well, what was interesting about, coming to those kind of those final scenes at the Bone Temple was we'd pretty much shot chronologically. Um, so we felt like we'd played out a lot of the journey so far, so
Yes.
like there was a lot of talk about Kelson, and obviously Spike is on this huge quest and is trying to get his mum there safely and alive. And then we landed at this beautiful location in North Yorkshire and were welcomed with this huge monument that was built by the art department, in such detail. And it was for a set that was like, you know, in ode to the dead and what that um is representative of. It was a very alive, the set. We were right next to the running water. There was like a constant music kind of washing through the set because they had Kelson had these wind chimes made of bones. So it was never quiet. It felt very, very alive. And what was beautiful about that moment and lovely about working with Rafe and the kind of energy that he has was like a Spike and Isla are so ready to meet him in that moment and are so desperate and so exhausted. Um, that it was lovely for me and Alfie to kind of just lean into to Rafe's energy and him be able to take control of that situation and guide us in that moment as mother and son and kind of be able to kind of deliver some home truths that maybe Isla hasn't been able to face herself. Um, so it was beautiful. And we were on night shoots as well. So I remember there was like a full moon one night, and we got all this kind of the smoke and the atmos and felt very singular. I was like, wow, I've never it's amazing to see how the creative team bring these ideas to life off the page.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only imagine that it was just such a highlight movie for so many different highlights.
Yeah.
Between spending somehow being in a very confined space. I mean, not to make you sound like a lazy actor, but you spend a lot of time in bed and kind of laying and sitting around in that. So I can only imagine what it was like to create this amazing character for such a confined space. I can only imagine spending perhaps time with Alfie in between scenes, etc., building up that bond. But to wrap things up here, Jody, if you had to stick a pin in any particular, highlights during your experience of helping to make such an outstanding film, what comes to mind for you? Well, I
Say
know I'm
that again.
positive.
Sorry, the signal went a little bit. Can you
Oh,
repeat
sorry.
them?
Sure. So if I was going to say, if you had to sort of, stick a pin in any particular, highlight during your experience of helping to make this film come to life, we'll end on a positive note, perhaps, or maybe it's not a nice note. What comes to mind for you?
I think for me, it was witnessing Alex Garland, Danny Boyle, Anthony Dodmantle, our DOP, um, seeing how they led the set, the kind of energy and passion and innovative nature that they had. It was so playful and daring and incredibly friendly and joyous and pleasurable. And I think there was you often find whether it's a lead actor, director, the energy of that person and how they present themselves trickles throughout the whole crew. And it informs how everyone feels like they can behave and do their job, and the way in which Danny conducts himself and leads was so inspiring and encouraging. And I think that was felt by everyone. And that's something that I will take away from this experience. And then to watch the film and just be like, this is something I'm so proud of. Like, it's so fucking, so cool and smart and just brilliant. So I'm honored to have been a small part in the
Absolutely. Well, I'd say
process.
you're a pretty major part. You're very humble. So thank you very much for your time today, Jody. Wish you and everybody else nothing but success, and I can't wait to see the success of this film and what you're going to do next.